With us. Could you tell us, in terms of that border between Israel and Lebanon, what is the latest and what do we know about that precondition that Mohammed Bagher Ghalibaf is trying to set there?
Well, the latest is that we know last night there was a telephone conversation between the US ambassadors for the two sides, for Israel and for Lebanon. And we know from both sides that the product of that call was an agreement to hold direct talks, we understand, next Tuesday in Washington. What we don't have an apparent agreement on between the two sides is what exactly those talks are going to be about. We heard subsequently from Lebanese officials that they believed they would be talking about a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, the Iranian proxy and Lebanese militant group. And we heard from the Israeli side that they were not committing to a ceasefire and not committing to talking about a ceasefire with Hezbollah. So we apparently still have an impasse there. From the Israeli side, they are saying that they are open to these talks. We heard that from Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, a couple of days ago. But they are also making it clear that they are going to keep bombing Hezbollah in Lebanon as they see fit. And as things stand at the moment, the Lebanese officials are saying that they do not see that as a solid foundation for talks. We have an impasse there, and an impasse which threatens to potentially overshadow these all-important talks this weekend in Islamabad.
And Joel, could you remind us of why Hezbollah is just so important to Iran when it comes to that axis of resistance in the region, the so-called axis of resistance, as Iran puts it?
Yeah, it was quite clear early on in this tentative ceasefire process between the US and Iran just how important Hezbollah was to Iran, because we had these apocalyptic threats from President Trump to destroy the very civilization of Iran. And at the same time, Iranian officials were making it very, very clear that a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah was absolutely vital to any deal that they agreed to ward off those threats from President Trump. Hezbollah is one of Iran's proxy groups in the region, one of the groups that it supports, along with Hamas in Gaza and the Houthis in Yemen, groups which are seen as a significant part of Iran's influence in the region, and groups which, if they are diminished, if they continue to be attacked as Hezbollah is being in Lebanon, may diminish Iran's influence across the region. Now, of course, Israel and Hezbollah are not the only decision makers. We have seen very clear suggestions that President Trump and the US is putting Israel under pressure. We believe that President Trump wants a quick exit from this situation, and he may continue to put Israel under pressure to scale back its attacks on Lebanon to ensure that deal can succeed. We may also, in the same vein, see some pressure from Iran on Hezbollah to agree to some kind of process in Lebanon, so both sides can ensure some success, some potential of success for these peace talks in Islamabad.
All right, Joel Gunter in Jerusalem there, thank you for that. Let's look at the role Pakistan is playing in all of this, because this is where these talks are happening, and it's thanks to mediation from Pakistan that we've been able to get to this point. So let's talk to Mansour Ahmad Khan, who is the former ambassador in Pakistan for Washington, for the US, as well as Pakistani ambassador to Afghanistan previously as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
So could we talk about why Pakistan was so well positioned to mediate between the United States and Iran in this way?
You know, when on 28th February, US and Israel attacked Iran, and Iran in retaliation expanded the war by hitting at Israel, also hitting at GCC countries. So the war that started on 28th February continued to expand. And it has seriously affected regional peace and stability. Pakistan is a neighbor of Iran. Pakistan has close relations with Iran. Pakistan has very close strategic and economic relations with GCC countries. Pakistan has very close relations with United States and other major powers like China. So Pakistan, we believed that was strategically well placed and also affected by this conflict in terms of its own peace and security and in terms of its own economic interaction with the world. So we thought that this war which continues to expand is not sustainable and is a dangerous thing for international peace and security and for international economy as well. So Pakistan from the beginning tried to counsel these countries, whether it was Iran or whether it was United States or the GCC countries or other allies of United States, that there should be talks, there should be dialogue to come out of this war and develop a sustainable peace framework for peace.
And Mr. Khan, do we know what role Pakistan really has, other than passing these proposals, these messages back and forth? Is there any sense of what other role they may have had in the midst of all of this? What does that mediation actually look like?
I think it's a very complex process, the process which has now started as the two delegations have already arrived, they are there. It is a complex process because the number of parties are involved is a large number. The Iran, United States, US allies, six GCC countries, then you were mentioning Israel and Lebanon issue. So a large number of parties are there with their own divergent positions. And there are a number of sticking issues, complex issues like how to transform this ceasefire into a permanent ceasefire or peace agreement, how to open Hormuz for free shipping, and how to deal with Iran's nuclear issue in accordance with the demands of the United States, as well as the international law and international regulations. So all these evolving a framework where all these issues can be addressed is a complex one. And then, as you have said, in your earlier coverage, that Israel-Lebanon issue continues to be a spoiler. If this issue continues, then it can derail the process at any time. So I think the effort of Pakistan and the negotiating parties, which are Iran and the US at the moment, will be to evolve an understanding on a basic framework and how to then move forward and see an implementation framework can be evolved, and if it can be taken to the United Nations Security Council or generally to the United Nations institutions. So it's a complex process. We have to wait and see.
I want to pick up on that point. Mr. Khan, I want to pick up on that point because you talked about the GCC. And this conflict, this war has been affecting Gulf countries as well. In your view, what leverage is there that Iran is prepared to give up when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz? It seems like it's a red line for the United States, and as far as Iran is concerned, it's leverage that they can't give up. So do you see any movement possible on that issue?
I think leverage that Iran has is, or expectation that Iran has, is that if there is a comprehensive peace agreement which enables Iran to not only negotiate peace, but also address the issues of sanctions which are placed on it for 47 years, and also can have understandings or international guarantees that it will not be attacked again, then I think there will be an opportunity for opening the Strait of Hormuz. You know, GCC countries, all the GCC countries are seriously affected by the closure of Strait of Hormuz. They were pumping around 3 million barrels per day of oil, but now since the strait has been closed, it has come down to 500,000 or even less. So I think their economies are being seriously affected, and then global supply chain of oil has been seriously affected. And when the war, before the ceasefire, the prices had shot up to $120 or even beyond $120 per barrel. So I think Iran will have certain incentives to move forward in the peace, but it will depend upon what is offered to Iran by United States and what kind of comprehensive deal emerges. If this deal is not comprehensive, lesser will be the chances to sustain it.
And you were the former ambassador to the United States. You understand how they view Iran. Do you believe that they will be satisfied with the outcome of this war being one where Iran still has some leverage over this vital shipping lane and also possibly has some sanctions lifted? Would that be a good outcome for the United States?
Let me just clarify, I was never ambassador of Pakistan to the United States, but I was ambassador of Pakistan to the IAEA and being ambassador to Afghanistan also at a very critical time. I have been closely engaged with the United States diplomatically. But to your answer, I think we are at a moment where after almost 30 to 40 days of war, all parties seek peace in one form or another. They want the war is unpopular. The war is unpopular in Iran. The war is unpopular in GCC. The war is unpopular in Pakistan, and the war is also unpopular in the United States. So all the countries, I think, United States also would like to see the negotiations moving towards a solution where we can find a sustainable end of this war. So I think. Of course, United States would like to have Strait of Hormuz opened freely for all kind of traffic, oil traffic and other cargo. Of course, United States would like that the war should end with a peace deal with Iran. Of course, United States would also like that there is some kind of agreement on nuclear issues with Iran. The United States and Iran were already part of JCPOA, so some kind of JCPOA plus or some new framework will have to be agreed where Iran, while giving commitment to not going for nuclear weapons, but is also allowed some kind of space for enrichment of uranium for peaceful nuclear purposes. So I think it's all in all, it's going to be a very complex process, and that is why the best case scenario should be that the parties should be able to agree on a broad framework and take it forward. The worst case scenario will be that if they don't agree and the talks break down. So let's keep our fingers crossed and let's remain hopeful, because a good stage has now been set, a groundwork has been done, and Pakistan will continue to make all possible efforts because during last 24 or 48 hours, Pakistan has received messages of support for this Islamabad process from all parts of the world, from all corners of the world. So it means international community is actually supporting this effort, and let's hope that it leads to a win-win solution for all sides.
All right, Mansour Ahmad Khan, thank you very much for your time. Now let's look at those negotiations, because we've talked about how difficult it is to predict what will happen, but the two countries, the two sides, seem very far apart on many key issues. With us is our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette. Now, Lise, when you're looking at their statements and what has circulated publicly, it doesn't seem like they see eye to eye on many of those important issues.
Let's look at this as step by step. Yes, they are very far apart on the key issues, but diplomacy is about symbols as well as substance. First of all, they've landed. And as you know, there was some doubts about that, particularly on the Iranian side. Both sides are at their highest level since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. That is sending a signal that they want to talk, and they want to talk with their other side who has some authority. We understand the two sides are now meeting. We're going to have talks separately with the Pakistanis, the Prime Minister, as well as the Army Chief, who played a key role in this mediation. Then the big question comes. Will the US Vice President J.D. Vance and the Parliamentary Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf meet face to face? And that will begin to set the tone. We heard from J.D. Vance. He said, I want to be assured that the Iranians will negotiate in good faith. The Iranians have been very clear that they will not accept the kind of language, it has to be said, President Trump uses. Diktats, ultimatums, that you have to surrender. Both sides are coming to this table wanting to do a deal, believing that they're winning, and ready to return to war if they don't win at the table.
And Lise, when we look at the goals of this war, Donald Trump has said regime change has happened. Is that how Iranians view it? I know you know the country very well.
As do you, Azadeh. When this war began on February the 28th, and in the days which followed, the big question was, does President Trump want regime change? Does he really want, as he often said, want to help the protesters? Does he want them to rise up, as the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made clear? Or was it that he wanted a Venezuela scenario? He called it the perfect scenario for Iran, where he would just eliminate, well, to use that term, to remove the head, in this case, the supreme leader, and then everything else would fall into place. And then he started saying that, well, I've achieved regime change because there's been change in the regime. All of us know that that is not the case. What has happened is that through these assassinations, many assassinations, they have removed the upper echelons of the security and political establishment. And it's widely observed that this now has left a system which is much more hardline, much more militarized, with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps calling the shots. But in that mix, you have the speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. Over 40 years, he's held top political and security positions. He's regarded as a hardliner who's pragmatic. And as always, in these situations, you think, how will Iran regard its strategic interests going forward? Does it want to do a deal? If it feels it has to give up too much in the deal, then it prefers to fight because it has its red lines and it will not go stray beyond them.
And when you say it's willing to fight, there is that issue, isn't there, that when it comes to the Islamic Republic, for them, survival is what's most important here. How does that complicate negotiations?
So from the very beginning, even the Iranians, when we were there in February, the deputy foreign minister said to us, if this is an existential battle, you are going to see the consequences. And we did see we saw the consequences in their extraordinary, shocking attacks on their Gulf neighbors, which of course the Gulf states described as reckless. But what was widely seen on the Iranian side as a war of survival, on the American side, a war of choice, has now become for the Americans a war of necessity. And for the Iranians, they've completely changed the battlefield. The main battlefield is now the Strait of Hormuz. And you've already discussed in this program, that is their main leverage. And that is also their economic lifeline, as they want to get the lifting of sanctions out of this, but also they realize that this is also gold dust for them to be able to have revenues from the Strait of Hormuz. It will be a key issue in these talks.
And Lise, you covered when the JCPOA negotiations were going on, that nuclear deal that President Donald Trump walked away from when he entered office in 2017. He stepped away in 2018. I'm wondering what differences you see when you compare those negotiations and where we are now.
Today, as a day, I'm remembering that day in Vienna, July 2015, and after nearly 2 years of breakthroughs and breakdowns, of really significant experienced delegations from Iran and the United States, as well as from the other permanent members of the Security Council and Europe, this landmark nuclear deal was concluded. And as you know, the Iranians took to the streets in celebration, daring to hope that Iran would finally engage with the rest of the world. This would be the opening, that they would see the lifting of the sanctions and they would see greater, not just economic freedoms, but even social freedoms. And then President Trump, as you say, pulled out in 2018, describing it as the worst deal ever in history, the deal made by President Obama's administration. And here we are in 2026. They're still trying to make a new nuclear deal. But whereas that deal of 2015 limited Iran to 3.67% enrichment of uranium, now they're confronting uranium enriched at 60%. Dangerously close to weapons grade. And it's a different regime in Iran. It's no longer the reformists who are in charge. This moment presents new opportunities because of the high-level engagement, but it also makes it incredibly difficult because there are now new problems and new leadership on both sides.
During that initial deal, some Gulf states had warned they were concerned there weren't enough controls on Iran's bank of missiles. How much of a focus do you think that'll be in these talks this time round?
And
Depending on how they take place, because again, there are so many unknowns.
that's interesting too, because in 2015, the Arab Gulf states were not involved at all in the negotiations. In fact, they were bitterly opposed to it, furious at the White House for doing this deal with their arch enemy. Then in recent years, they had a cautious rapprochement. They didn't want this war. They made that clear to President Trump. But once it was started, now, as I mentioned, they are furious with Iran. And the senior Gulf officials have said to me that they will insist that not just the nuclear file be on the table, not just the Strait of Hormuz, for them that's crucial too, but the ballistic missiles which have been unleashed against their countries by Iran. So again, the Gulf states this time, even if they're not at the negotiating table today, they will certainly want to have a say going forward. And of course, so will Israel.
Gulf states have also talked about reparations. The UAE certainly did for some of the damage that's happened in their countries during this war. Then you've got Iran that's talking about reparations too. So where do you see that ending up?
I think that is one of many, many issues that are on the table, many difficult issues, which why President Trump's optimistic prediction and the way he always frames his peacemaking, that there could be, in his words, a peace deal within the 2 weeks of this shaky ceasefire. That's impossible, as you know. The nuclear file is too difficult, too technical, the other issues as well added onto it. I think what's really important is that they make a start, that they establish some kind of confidence today, that as J.D. Vance said, we want to see if the Iranians are negotiating in good faith, the Iranians want to see if they're negotiating in good faith, and if there's a kind of a personal chemistry, because that matters too, a personal chemistry, the personal chemistry between former Secretary of State John Kerry, former Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif was really crucial to the success of the 2015 deal. So much is at stake today. I think we just have to, it's going to go hour by hour. And right now, we're just waiting to see if they even start.
And finally, Lise, you returned from Iran recently, and that was after that brutal crackdown that happened inside the country in January. What do you think is at stake for the people of Iran?
It's such an important point to mention that we cannot simply focus on this high-stakes diplomacy. As you know, Iran is traumatized. Even those, and we heard it directly from people when we were there in February, people saying nobody wants their countries to be attacked. We see it as our last hope, that we need a military intervention from the United States to help us bring about change, because we saw the force that our security forces used against us. And now, it's hard for us to say because we don't have a clear idea, but many inside Iran and outside are saying, this is not the war we wanted. You're attacking our crucial infrastructure. You're attacking our precious heritage. Civilians are dying as the missiles slam into crowded residential areas. And you've left the regime in place, and it's even more hard line. What we felt in February, and I think right now it's even more profound, Iranians want change right across the spectrum. For some it's economic change,
right.
For some it's social freedoms, and for many Iranians, they want a different future.
Right. All right, our chief international correspondent there, Lise Doucette. So many unknowns when it comes to how these talks will unfold. At the very least, many hope for a continuation to this ceasefire. Keep watching us here on BBC News as we bring you developments from this region here on the channel. Keep watching. Thank you very much.